Hello, beloveds, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, a podcast for those who are survivors of childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and narcissistic abuse. This podcast is hosted by Rachel Leroy, a college professor and trauma survivor. Many of us spend years trying to heal and don't get anywhere. We don't always target the trauma itself, which is so often what keeps us stuck. This podcast is where faith meets science. Rachel is an emotional healing expert with 20 years of experience applying healing modalities that helped her start making progress after nothing else worked. She'll show you how to do the same. Each week, we'll cover a topic that will show you how to heal trauma for good. Please check out our website and show notes at christianemotionalrecovery.com and join the Facebook community, Trauma Survivors Unite, Christian Emotional Recovery.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, and welcome to the beginning of a new year. And I hope that you had a wonderful Christmas break and a wonderful New Year, and I hope you're starting the new year off in a great place. But either way, this podcast has been successful due to your subscriptions to the podcast, your listening, your downloads, and I greatly appreciate that. I wanted to use this episode that should be just a few minutes long to give you updates and upcoming additions that will be included in the podcast and on the platform that will help you and also allow me to continue to do the podcast. But first, I wanted to say thank you so much for a wonderful first season of the podcast. Thank you for joining my Facebook group. Thank you for joining, our Facebook group. Thank you for joining the podcast and listening to it. Thank you for your downloads, and I so appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. I am so humbled and so honored. There were around 4,000 downloads of the podcast this past year of the 24 episodes, and this is the first time I've ever done this. So I'm humbled and I'm honored. I'm just a humble English and creative writing instructor and editor and book coach who is trying to do something to take my experience and help other people. So I wanted to go ahead and include some updates on season 2 and jump right into it. Of course, as most of you know, the name of the platform is Christian Emotional Recovery, and that is the name of the YouTube channel as well. In the past, it was called Stop Striving and Start Thriving, and that was actually what it was called last season, but in the middle of last season, I changed it. It made more sense to sync up the name with the Facebook group. That's also the name of the Facebook group, Christian Emotional Recovery, and it's also the name of the podcast, of course. So in this episode, I wanted to give you some updates, some calls to action, and give you some ways that you can help support the podcast and help support me as the podcaster so I can continue to do this and so I can continue to support you. So if you're helping me, you're not just helping me, but you're also helping yourself, because I will be able to provide more tools, more resources, more teaching, and I'll be able to continue to do this. And also you're helping your fellow human being, because there are other trauma survivors who are also benefiting from this platform. And so I want to make more free tools available to those that want to get those. And for those that are able, I want to also start creating some tools that are monetized so that I can help you even more. That enables me to have the time, the energy, and the resources to put more into the podcast. That allows me to take a calling on God's calling on my life and to go a step further with it. And it enables me to also help more people, because if I'm also providing tools and resources that are monetized in addition to free resources, which the podcast itself will always be free, the Facebook group will always be free, and the YouTube channel will always be free. And I always want to make sure there's free resources for those who might not be able to afford it. And also I might provide some kind of resources in the future where you can choose what you pay, where if you are more blessed and more fortunate, you might be helping another person to be able to afford something. If you pay the higher price, and then they can pay the lower price, and at the same time they still feel like and are contributing to helping the podcast to grow, because like I said, that helps me to be able to continue to do this, to fulfill God's call on my life. It helps me to be able to help you more, and it also helps you to help other trauma survivors who might not get help or have other resources, but this channel might be where they get that help or what resonates with them. So anything that you can do, I greatly appreciate it, and it means the absolute world to me. So I wanted to go ahead and give you a few updates for the podcast. First of all, there will be a new season, and there will be new podcast episodes. I have not quite decided the exact amount of episodes. 24 episodes, I'll admit, was a doozy, and believe it or not, I started recording those episodes in 2019, and some of them did not come out until 2021. So for me, it's incredibly time consuming to create 24 episodes. I love making the podcast, don't get me wrong. I absolutely enjoy it. It's an absolute joy. It does not feel like an obligation at all. But the reality is that I teach online at Southern New Hampshire, and I'm trying to also get training and build a book coaching business. So this is something, it's a labor of love, and it's something that I would like to eventually make my part-time or full-time career. So that is how you helping me can also help me a little more to help you. So updates on the podcast, what I was getting at was that I may do 20 episodes this year instead of 24, so it's not quite as much of a strain. But I may do 24, I just haven't decided yet. But there will be a new season. The new season will come out sometime in either February or March. Don't hold me to that. Things happen. I do have chronic health conditions, and sometimes I'm incapacitated by those. So I do everything that God enables me to do and everything that I can do, in addition to trying to make a living, which I'm sure most of you can understand. And that's another reason getting help on the podcast is so helpful, because the hours that I put in on the podcast when I'm working on it, usually I spend anywhere from 5 to 10 hours a week on the podcast. And I'm not complaining, but the reality is being a trauma survivor, I do have some chronic health conditions. Sometimes those health conditions slow me down and or even incapacitate me. So, working as an instructor and then doing these other commitments, sometimes I can get slowed down. But probably 80 to 90% of the time I am able to work, and I am very thankful for that. So I would like to be able to share more about me and my life with you. I feel like I haven't done that. I don't want this podcast to be about me. It's about you. But at the same time, I have not shared a lot of my experiences, and so I want to include a bio on the webpage. I want to add more about my experience and my qualifications for doing this podcast. And along the way, I hope that we can get to know one another. And I also am going to add I hope I'll be able to do some expert interviews on the podcast this season, so that we can start getting more perspectives involved, because I think it's good, no matter what you're doing, to get multiple perspectives on anything that you might be doing. It's enriching, and it helps to inform the audience better of the topic. So that's something else I hope to do in the new year. Probably 20 to 24 episodes. They should start coming out in February or March, or sometime very soon thereafter, but they'll be out this year in the earlier part of the year. A few other updates. Like I said, I want you to be involved in this process. I want you to be involved in the Facebook group. I want you to be involved in the YouTube channel. I want you to be involved in the podcast itself. And so some of the other things that I want to do is give you some calls to action where you can help me, you can help other podcast listeners, and you can help yourself by doing some of these things to help promote the podcast and to help it move in the direction that is best for you, the audience, So a couple of calls to action. One of them is, if you have the time, please take a few minutes right when you get done listening to this episode and take a couple of surveys for me. Whichever apply to you, take 2 surveys, and I'll include links to the surveys in the show notes to this episode. This is a non-numbered episode, but it's a update. So take the 2 surveys, or at least take one of them, depending on which one applies to you more. One survey is how I can best serve you in the podcast this year. I want to know what you want for the podcast. What topics interest you? What strategies or modalities do you want to learn about? What people would you like to see interviewed? Now, I can't promise that I'll do all of those, but I will try my best to do as many of the requests as possible, and that will also guide me in getting your input into what is best for the podcast. 2, another survey, if you're in the group. If not, please join the Facebook group. It's called Christian Emotional Recovery, and there I will also ask you to take a survey, which I'll also include in the show notes and in Facebook itself. I don't have that up yet, but it will be up soon. But take the other survey on what you would like to see in the group itself in 2022 and beyond. Okay, so there's 2 surveys, one on what you want to see in the podcast this year, and 2, what you want to see in the Facebook group this year. Okay, and then, but please only take those surveys if you are involved in some way in one or both of those, depending on the situation. Okay, thank you. So I wanted to also be a little more transparent about what goes into making the podcast and how helping me can help you to continue to get the lovely podcast each week that it comes out. Of course, it comes out every 2 weeks. So the next call to action is and this one takes a little bit of time. I'm going to start a Patreon account, and if you're familiar with Patreon, it's basically just a place where artists and creators like YouTubers and podcasters and artists and musicians get support from their listeners, their clients, and their audience. And they may do that by selling some kind of subscription with exclusives, by selling certain products and services, and by just taking straight up donations. And it's a very legitimate process that has been done for many years. And so I'm going to start a Patreon account, and that's one way that you can help me out. So I wanted to give you a little more information about what goes into the podcast, so you get an idea of why am I asking for help on Patreon. So Patreon basically, like I said, there are 3 ways you can help me. You can buy products and services on there, which I will be putting up. Right now I just have the meditations, but that can help as well. 2, you can do the monthly subscription where you'll get specific exclusives. Right now I'm looking at maybe giving you the episode a week or 2 early, and maybe giving you the meditations a download for free. You can get them on YouTube, but having them downloaded means you don't have to be online to listen to them. So those are a couple of exclusives you might get as a Patreon subscriber, and the subscription would be somewhere between $4 or $5 a month, and that's it. It's not much at all. So I'll let you know more about that when that is up and running. And so a little bit about the financials behind running the podcast. There's a lot more time and energy that goes into it than you might think. I won't bore you with the details, but basically in terms of time, I work on the podcast about 5 to 10 hours a week when I'm working on it, between brainstorming ideas, writing episodes, writing show notes, recording episodes, editing episodes, putting the episodes in different formats. For example, I have to put them in a different format for YouTube than I do for putting them in the audio format, and also adding them to whatever platforms I need to add them to. I also administrate, I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm the administrator of the group solely right now. I may ask for help on that in the near future. I create infographics that you see in the group and in other places. Like, it's not very active, but I also have an Instagram account. Feel free to sign up. Same name, Christian Emotional Recovery. I maintain an email list and website. That's where the podcast is based. But I also have a hosting site, and that's where the actual audios are located and where I keep my statistics. So this adds up not just time, but it does cost money to subscribe to these. Other things that I do is I create meditations, I make videos, I edit the videos and the meditations, and I absolutely enjoy doing all of it. I'm not complaining at all. But the fact is, it costs money. And another fact is I don't have a lot of money right now, so I'm paying for this out of my own pocket. Not a problem. It's a labor of love, like I said, but I'll be honest, sometimes I struggle with paying my bills. Sometimes I don't know how I'm going to pay for everything because I have some health conditions. And right now I'm trying to get some treatments to help me with my PTSD. For example, regular therapy, chiropractic therapy, and cranial sacral therapy. And so just for me to be able to continue to do this and to function, getting that help also helps me to help you as well. And that's just some of the things that go into the podcast in terms of time. Now, in terms of paying for services, fees, and resources, I do need to get a new Camtasia software program soon because the one I have is 10 years old. I just need an updated one, and that's somewhere between $100 and $200. But I wanted to be transparent with you about the financials. So I'm actually going to include a chart of what I pay for each month just to give you an idea and be transparent about what I'm doing right now. And I will be putting more into the podcast in the near future to pay for a store and also to pay for an email list. Eventually that will be monetized as well. It'll cost money. But like I said, I want to put up some services and some products and have the Patreon monthly subscription with exclusives, and you can just do straight up donations. Any of those are helpful and I greatly appreciate it. But just breaking down the financials, Canva, I use Canva for the visuals and for infographics and for pictures, and it is so well worth the money. I use it for my other businesses as well. It's $13 a month. And then podcast hosting from Buzzsprout. Podcast hosting it's a wonderful site. I absolutely love them. It's $18 a month because I pay, I think, $12 for the hosting where I keep my podcasts housed. And then I send the podcast to the website where you see it. And I send it to all those other platforms where you can get the actual podcast. So that's $18 a month, $12 for the housing of the podcast, and $6 for audio enhancement because I believe in doing good quality work. If you're going to do something, do it right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but do it right. And so that enhances the audio. It cleans up the audio in their platform. I also have a business email, and it is Google Workspace, which also allows me to have cloud storage to store all the files and everything for the podcast, like audio, video, pictures, other things like surveys, and that's $12 a month, and that's to have enough storage as it grows. Christian Emotional Recovery website is $8 a month. It's a great website. I love it. It's podcastpageio.io. My SSL security certificate for the website is about $12 a month. My domain is $25 a year. None of those are a big deal, but they do add up. I also have to pay for music, and I have to hire voiceover actors to do the intro and the outro. That's the beginning and the end of the podcast. So all of those things add up. And I have other expenses for other things as well that are not related to the podcast, of course, as well. But those are some of the things that I pay for. And like I said, I may be creating a store soon. That may cost more money, but that will allow me to be able to help you more. And also, I may eventually need to pay for email list hosting. Right now I've got a free one, but as you expand, it does cost money. And usually that's anywhere from $10 to $30 a month, depending on the service. So I don't want to bore you with all those details. But that's just a little bit about what goes into the podcast. So it's probably close to $100 a month just for those services that I use for the podcast. So any help that you can give is greatly appreciated. Now back to what we're doing this upcoming year. Calls to action. First of all, taking the 2 surveys. Second of all, you can join the Patreon and help in 3 ways. You can either make a straight up donation, purchase products and services as they become available, and or do a monthly subscription, which will be about $4 or $5 a month. Not much at all. The next call to action is if you add your name to the email list, that will help you to get updates on the show. And when you do add your name to the email list, I will give you a free resource, which is the Acorn process an infographic. It's a free exclusive infographic to help you process difficult emotions. And that's with the ACORN acronym. And that's basically the different steps you go through to process a difficult emotion to help you heal your trauma. Okay. And so updates will be included in that. You'll get other free resources in the future. And you'll also get updates about the platform and the show in case you miss something along the way. So if you add your name to the list today, you'll get that free resource as well. So go ahead and do that. It's in the show notes as soon as you get done listening here, or you can even pause it and do it right now. I'll still be here. Next, if you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. Why subscribe to the YouTube channel if all the podcasts are on there as well and you already have them? Well, there are things on there that you don't have in the podcast itself. First of all, the podcast, the YouTube channel's name is now called Christian Emotional Recovery. It was Stop Striving and Start Thriving. It's now called Christian Emotional Recovery. I'll include the link in the show notes. Go ahead and go there, click subscribe immediately, and you'll get new things that come out as they do, which might include exercises that you won't get on the regular podcast, meditations. There's already meditations there that can help you process difficult emotions. There is an ACORN meditation that you can use anytime you have access to the internet. And there are 4 versions, a short, a long, with and without music. Okay, so you can pick the one that works for you. And then if you, like I said, you'll get exclusive videos, meditations, and exercises to help you with emotional and trauma recovery that you can only find there. So the other thing, I'm hoping to start putting up a couple of videos a month that include more instructional material. And I'm going to see how this works, but I have been hesitant to do videos because they're a little more trouble, honestly, than audio. But I'm going to work on trying to put out a couple of videos a month, and those will only be in the group and on YouTube. So subscribe to YouTube. That's another call to action. And the last one is please, please, please review the podcast. I know there's a lot of faithful followers. I appreciate you listening every week. But if you can, go to wherever you get your podcast and download it and put in an honest review today. One, that helps get more people on the podcast. More followers means you get more help and more resources. 2, it also helps me to know what you want and what you need for the podcast in the future. It's another way that I can survey how the podcast is going and how it can help you more. Okay? So please review the podcast as soon as you can, and I greatly appreciate that. And then lastly, the calls to action that you can do are take the surveys, add your name to the email list, subscribe to the YouTube channel, join the Facebook group, subscribe to or purchase on Patreon, subscribe to Insight Timer. That's one I didn't add, but Insight Timer is an app. If you're into meditations, you can go there and you can sign up. If not, don't worry about it. And please review the podcast. So that's just a little bit. I'll put all the information in the bottom. This coming season, I want to do some interviews. I want to get the group more active. I'm going to create a Patreon account. And the first episodes should be out sometime in the late winter or the early spring. So that's it. And when some of this stuff is already up and running, I will put out at least one more update on the podcast, including, hey, the Patreon is up and running. Here's the link. And so you are aware that that stuff is actually up and running. And if you're on the email list, I'll also send out an email, and I may do a little video or something to update you as well. But I just wanted to thank you again for a wonderful and successful first year of Christian Emotional Recovery. It is an honor and a privilege to help you on your healing journey. And this is part of my healing journey as well. And this is a labor of love, and I appreciate any support that you can do. If you can't support me financially, then if you just subscribe to the YouTube channel, join the Facebook group, help get it active, and just be supportive to the other patrons that are on these sites, then you're helping me in that way too. Do what you can, and I appreciate anything you can do. Thank you so much. God bless you, and I'm excited for a wonderful 2022 podcast and what will come of that. Thank you so much. Hello everyone. I just wanted to do a quick update that other part of this podcast episode or update was recorded at the beginning of the year, And right around the beginning of the year, I also started having some symptoms of, I don't know what. I have chronic conditions, but I started having pins and needles over my whole body. I was extremely fatigued. My heart was beating fast. I was having all these symptoms. And it was difficult for me to function. It seemed like maybe some kind of autoimmune, neurological, or hormonal response to something. I don't know what it is. I've gone to see a neurologist. The tests have come back normal. I'm going to go see an endocrinologist. I'm seeing my general practitioner, and that's been taking up a lot of my time and energy. And I still have the pins and needles in my body. I'm seeing a physical therapist, and so I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with my health. It has incapacitated me for a few weeks. I'm starting to feel a little better, but I'm still having symptoms, and I'm still trying to figure out what's going on with my body. So I apologize. It may slow down the podcast episodes getting out, but I will be working on them, and I will be getting them out, and I will update you on everything with the podcast, everything with my health. If you could just send me your prayers, and I greatly appreciate it, but I still plan on getting the podcast out, and I'm going to figure out what's going on with my health, and God willing, get back on track and help, get everything straightened out with that. But like I said, I have chronic conditions, and this happened kind of out of nowhere. So I don't know if I had COVID with no symptoms and responded with some kind of autoimmune reaction. I don't know if it was, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to keep figuring that out until I get to the bottom of it. But I just wanted to update you on that, and that it might take a little longer to get the podcast going this year, but I'm still going to work on it. I'm still going to get there. And all the more reason that I really appreciate your help, and that it will help me to be able to continue to do this. God bless you. Thank you so much. And I will be sending out some more updates soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Christian Emotional Recovery, hosted by Rachel Leroy. For links to this week's resources and to join the discussion, check out this episode's show notes at christianemotionalrecovery.com, where you can also find links to our YouTube channel and Facebook group. Join our email list and get other episodes and resources. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review the podcast and tell a friend who may benefit from this message. See you next time. And remember, beloveds, God loves you, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made.